Hello everyone, it's Nick here with MP Gunsmith and Firearms located in Lewiston, New York. Our phone number is 716-481-7302. You got any questions or comments, feel free to reach out, call us. Today I am going to go over the disassembly and assembly of this firearm right here. This is a Stevens Model 325C. I had a previous video out where we just acquired it, attempted to shoot it, the chamber wouldn't accept the round. We got that all squared away, but I want to show you how to completely disassemble this firearm, the trigger assembly and everything. There's a lot of pins and some springs in there. You got to be very cautious with when you're taking it apart. Make sure they go back in the right place to operate properly. So with that being said, we're going to get started. First thing you want to do is make sure it is unloaded. See, my bolt is already open, but for safety purposes, remove the magazine. So it's a 3-round box magazine. We'll set that off to the side. Work the bolt. See, it's empty. Okay, to remove the bolt, you have to have the safety here up in the firing position. Squeeze trigger back, and then you can slide the bolt out. Pretty standard on most bolt action rifles these days. Okay, I'm going to pause for 1 second. Alright, and once you have the bolt out, it's pretty simple from there to get the receiver off of the stock. You flip it up on its end like this. You'll see there's 3 screws here. Okay, 2 in the back, 1 in the front, right there, 1 in the front. Okay. Sure you grab a red screwdriver, and then you take out these 3 screws, 2 in the back, 1 in the far back just goes right into the stock. It's a little wood screw. Nothing special there, okay? I am going to end up cleaning up some of these screws. I mean, it's 1949 this rifle was made. It's obviously been apart before. It's a little marred up around these screw heads, so we're going to clean those up. This one in front of the trigger housing actually goes through all the way to the stock, or to the receiver, along with the one in the front. This one here also goes through to the receiver, to the barrel. There's a barrel band on here on the front that kind of slides loosely in there. Those screws off, you just take off that trigger guard like so. Take out the front one. Like I said, I'm going to be fixing all these screws. You can see the screw, kind of see the screw heads are kind of all marred up. It's from using wrong bits. With those 3 screws out, you can take your stock off like that. Pretty simple. Remove the stock. And what you're left with are these 3, these parts right here. Here's that barrel band in the front. Instead, it's kind of loosely, just flops around in there. There's a, if you push in on them, I'll show you. Pop it off of here. This barrel band on the front, it's like this, and here's the block that goes in it, and you can see it's got tabs, so when you put it in and take it out, you just get those lined up in those tabs, squeeze it together. There's your barrel band. It comes off pretty easy. It's gonna give it a little squeeze so you can slide it back down, okay, and then it comes apart. Pretty simple. So that's the front barrel band that comes off. Now, trigger housing assembly. See, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 pins. They are directional. I mean, if you have a real good view of it, they're rounded on one side, so you ain't pounding them suckers back through. You only go one direction with them. Get a pick here. There's this spring here. Okay. is your trigger spring. That one's pretty simple to see how it goes in. Goes through this pin, lines in through the trigger. Okay. There's a spring down here. This one, if you can see it right there. There's a spring there. That one is a little tricky to put in. It's not hard. You just got to use a little pin and just think about it for a second. Because if you put it in the easy way, you're like your pin slides in super easy, it's wrong. I'll show you when I get it out. It's not round, it doesn't have a round hole. It's kind of like a oblong hole, so it has tension on it once it's in properly. Down in here, I don't know if you can see it so well. There's this lever here with that pin that slides through it right there. You can see how nice and shiny it is. That rides on the trigger. You're gonna see when I take this apart, there's like 4 or 5, maybe 6 pieces all together in this assembly here. Safety, pretty simple, just screws. This is a 2-piece. This piece and this piece of the safety kind of work together. You see it right there. It moves when you push that safety, and that's what locks your trigger. And those are simple. It's just screws. Take those out. So we're gonna get all this apart, because there's the reason I want this all apart. It's never been cleaned. It's filthy. I can't get this trigger housing off without taking all these pieces out, because there's 2 screws. One that sits about right here, and the other one somewhere around here, down in here, that you can't get to unless you take it apart. So, that being said, let's start taking stuff apart. This is just a magazine, part of the magazine guide right here that I'm taking off in the front. I'm not going to do anything. It's just a simple screw. Take that out. Before I put it back together, I'm going to pause and clean everything. You guys should know how to clean things by now, so you don't really need me to show you how to do that. One other thing, bolt catch right here before I start taking things apart. Okay, there's a pin there and a spring. Make sure, the biggest thing, and I've said it before in my videos, if you're unsure, take pictures before you take it apart. That way you have a reference when you go to put it back together. That way you'll know you're in the right spot, make sure everything works properly. So that one, it's pretty simple. Should be able to just get a pick under that pin. Yep. And that one slides up. There. You pick under it. And you can pull out the bolt release, or the bolt catch, and the spring that goes with it. Like so. There's the bolt catch. Here's my spring. Okay. And they sit happy together with the pin. I will make a note that when you start to take apart your trigger housing, though the pins may look like they're the same size, there are slight differences in diameter. So if you go to put it back together and you have one pin, say you grab a pin, you stick it in your trigger, and that sucker just wants to keep flopping in and out, this is the wrong pin. The one for the trigger is a little thicker than this pin for the trigger housing. Is thicker than these pins here. Okay, so if you have one of these pins in this trigger housing, that sucker is going to pop right out. Okay, so these back 2 pins, trigger housing, trigger pin, and this pin here are thicker than these 2 front pins. Okay, keep that in mind. There, that's a better view. I don't know why I didn't do that first. This pin and this pin have a slightly thicker diameter than these 2 pins in the front. So if you go put this back together and you have a pin in here that just wants to keep flying out, probably got these backwards. Just keep that in mind. So we're going to remove our safety. So the safety is 2 pieces. Those 2 screws, they coincide, they work together. Take out those 2 screws. Can't really mess them up. The screws are identical. Okay. Take your safety pieces. Throw them in the tray for cleaning. Those are where we get down to business. Okay, we're going to drive these pins out. We'll start with the trigger pin. I'm going to take that one out first. It's like a puzzle. That'll be the last piece I put in is my trigger. So I have myself a nice block to set this on because it's gonna be fun. Right size punches. First pin, that spring that comes out with it, it's attached to the trigger, your trigger spring, right there. With that out, you should be able to just grab the trigger, pull right out. There's your trigger housing. The spring sits in here like this, upside down. Spring sits in there like this, and your pin obviously goes through that hole. So like I said, these pins are slightly thicker than the ones in the front of the housing. So now I'm going to remove this back pin here. Again, there's a spring in here, so we need to be careful. We don't want to launch our spring across anywhere. Let my punch go all the way through to hold that spring in there. Here's my pin. So now I can remove this, make sure there's no tension on my spring. We're good. Remove my spring right there. Like I said right at the beginning, the spring does not have a round hole. It's kind of oblong. So when you go to set this in there, you're going to fight the spring just to get your pin in. Because if you put it in wrong, when you want to go to put it in, it wants to stand straight up. Then your pin slides right through, but then your spring isn't doing shit. So to get it in the right position, it's got to pretty much lay down. And what I do is I take another punch from the back side, put it through, and then I push my pin through, allowing the punch to come out. And I still have to, once I get the pin in so far, I have to tap it in, tap the pin in, because there's spring pressure then on my pin. So keep that in mind. This is a spring that's a little bit of a pain to get in. So with that out, I can remove the bolt catch from the back. That's that. Now I'm going to remove these front pins here. These pieces are just going to be flopping in here now. These are 2 pieces in here, and I will show you them as they come out. Right here. So let's see if I can hold all of them together. When it's inside the trigger housing, this hole on the bar, trigger bar, goes in the top of that block. Okay. And then your trigger, okay, See how it's got this pin here? I showed it earlier. Trigger, right, it's underneath that pin, like that. And then this is obviously in here, like so. It's one big complicated assembly. That's why I say if you're unsure of things, to always take pictures when taking things apart. With all those pieces out, you're left with 2 screws. We'll take these screws out. Get a different screwdriver to get in that one. Try not to get in the way of the camera. I'm trying to show as much as I can, but you know, I'm just getting in the way of things. And just like that, there's the trigger housing, magazine release, okay. So that's how you take the trigger assembly apart on the Stevens model 325. This is, like I said, this is a 325C. As you can see here, it's been on the C version. It's tapped for scope mount, which I actually have here. So I'm going to actually mount it here. What I like about it is if you don't want the scope, you can still leave the mount on, still use the iron sights. So I'm going to end up taking those out, but I'm going to clean everything. And like I said in my previous video about this firearm, it's unique. It was made from 1947 to 1949, maybe early 1950, before Stevens was bought by Savage. When Savage bought them, they rebranded it. It became a Savage Model 343. They made slightly different upgrades to it. For one, when Savage took over, they got rid of this flat-handled bolt, and they went to the more traditional one we see nowadays with the ball. But essentially it was the same firearm. When they made this one, it was after they had a lot of surplus left over from World War II. As you can see here, you got the barrel nut from a 30 caliber rifle from World War II. So they used a lot, and these were made for, let's say, to be inexpensive for people coming home from the wars and everything. So, but that's it. I'm going to clean everything up, and then I'll come back and I will put everything back together for you. Okay? Thank you. Hello everyone, we are back again. This is the Stevens Model 325C that we were working on. Earlier in the video I showed you how to disassemble it. I went over a couple of the springs that were in there. I went and cleaned, I paused, cleaned everything. Now we're ready to go back together, so I'm going to show you the assembly portion of this. Just want to touch on cleaning. Everybody has their ways of cleaning things, so no way is wrong, no way is 100% right. As long as you clean it and you make sure you have oil and so nothing rusts. I just want to let you know how, especially on these older firearms that haven't been taken apart in a long time and they're just coated in dirt and grime and grease and oil built up over all the years. I like to lightly scrub everything with like a simple green or a soapy water solution, get the rough stuff off, and then I put everything in a ultrasonic cleaner for about 10 minutes, and that really gets the rest of the stuff, especially in the really tiny areas that you can't get a brush into. And then when I'll pull them out of there, I'll rinse everything, and then I actually take all the metal parts and I bake them about 200 degrees for a good 10-20 minutes. And what that does is it pushes all the oil out of the pores of the metal. Metal is porous. It has little tiny holes, and that's water gets down in those and it'll start to rust. And once I pull everything out of the oven while it's still hot, I throw it in a tub of gun oil and let it soak that oil right back in. So all my parts are severely well coated with oil. And then, you know, I clean the barrel and everything, I inspect the barrel and everything, so I know that is 100% good to go. So with that being said, and how I do cleaning on older things, I mean, I don't do that process for everything. If it's newer and it's not covered in a bunch of shit, then I'll just take it apart. I'll have my tub here, I'll scrub it and everything, clean it, make sure everything's good to go, slap it back together. But with that being said, you can see we got our barrel here. Okay, we're going to put this back together. Still have all my tools sitting over here ready to go, and here are the parts. All right, so good way to start doing this is to get everything out and organized. Like I said, everything's covered in oil, so I will set everything on a rag just so I know what we are working with as I do it. You can see setting everything up kind of like that. And we will get this bad boy back together. Got the parts out, ready to go. We're going to start putting this bad boy back together. We're going to start with our trigger housing assembly, just the housing itself. Okay, we need our trigger housing, and we need our magazine release as well. Okay, if you remember from earlier in the video, these are held in with the 2 screws that go down through the housing. 2 holes there. If you can see here, there's 1 hole there, and the other hole is there. All right, and these screws are the longer, fatter of the screws right there. The easiest way, different screwdriver for this one. Start in the back, get it in loosely. Loosely start it. So one of the biggest things why you start with this housing with the back screw and why you want it loosely, your magazine release goes underneath the housing. So once you get that back screw started, you can lift up the housing, put your magazine release in place, get your other screw ready. That's where you need like little fingers. Get it in place, and then you can tighten everything down.
front one snug, tighten up your back one, make your magazine release as square as you can. It should just ride on the receiver itself. Tighten everything up. Boom. And those are nice and tight. Just get a bigger screw in there. Alright. So next, we're going to put in our front block here. Okay, remember this one? It partners with this piece here, our trigger bar. And remember, the trigger bar goes into this top hole. Okay, so it'll go like that. We're going to put this piece in first, drop in the lower pin. This is where having a punch, something to hold it in place, will come in handy. Or you just knock things over. Pin, it's your lower pin. See how it just slides in place. Okay, there's no force needed to push that pin in place. I'll tap it back in place when we're all said and done, just to make sure it's set. Now with the bottom pin in, take our trigger bar. Alright, make sure our pin on there is in place. And we'll set this down. This is where I like to use my tools to help hold everything. Get my upper pin. You see I got my punch in there holding everything together. Okay. Now, just let it follow it through. Line up your holes and the pin slides right in. Okay, just like that one. Now I will set these two on the block. Take my hammer. Tap them in so they stay in place. Like so. Just like that. Now, now I will take my rear block here. This is the one that's got that tricky spring I was telling you about. So that gets set in. We're going to take our rear block here for the trigger. This is the one that's got that weird ass spring. It kind of has an oblong hole. Okay, so get the block in place. Again, grab a punch, something that you can use to line up the holes. Okay, just to hold everything in place. Get your pin there. Now, so this spring, when it goes in, you're going to set it in like this, and you have to fight it. So you're going to be pushing down on your loop there, so you can get your pin in there. And the big thing is, you have to make sure the spring is in the right position, because if you have it wrong, and you'll know you'll have it wrong because the pin will go through super easy without a fight, and your spring's just flopping around, it's not doing anything. So what I like to do is use my punch here to hold everything in place, grab my pin, get it started through, get it through to where the spring is. Make sure I have my spring in the right position. It's going to want to fight you every bit of the way. Already used the punch to hold it out of the way. And once you get it in there, use the hammer to get it in the rest of the way. And there you go. Now that spring is doing what it's supposed to do. There's tension on it. It's in place. You can see, bring this up here. You can see the spring right there. Okay. You can see that there is now tension on that spring. Okay. It's not just flopping around in there loosey. It's nice and tight. So it'll do its job. And the last part of this assembly here is the trigger itself. So get our pieces back in line down there. Like I said earlier, that bar that's on the trigger bar, that pin, rides along here on the trigger. So set that down in there around the trigger bar. See if I can show you that. So you can see that pin. The trigger just goes right underneath it. Hopefully you can see that. Trigger's underneath that pin. That comes right off. So you slide that down in there. Get it around that trigger bar. And then underneath your pin. at that. And you take your final spring, final pin, right here. Okay. Get that punch. Where I'm going to need a little help holding this spring because fingers aren't that tiny. Lots of little pieces in here that work together. It do not make it easy to take apart or put back together. Let's try this a different way. Pin. This is supposed to be the easier spring, guys. This is the one that's fighting me the most. And just like that. You didn't see much of that, but that was the one that fought me the most, and it was supposed to be the easier one. So now we're going to just tap all these, making sure they're in there solid. Remember what I said earlier. If you have a pin that wants to just keep popping out, you got the wrong pin in the wrong hole. These two pins have a slightly thicker diameter than these two front pins. So I want to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. It also doesn't help to take just a punch and give them a good solid set into their hole. Last thing you want is your pins to come out. I fight myself. Everything is set. Let me stop fighting myself on my jobs. I'll be all set. So, we're going to put our safeties back in. Okay, like I said, it's a 2-piece safety, if you remember from earlier. So, our first piece is going to go in like so. Take our screw, get that started. Take our second piece of our safety and make sure you line up that square notch. Just show you this. When you put this together, this notch here goes inside there. So it's going to operate like something like this. Okay? Once you stick it back together. That one started, get that one in place, and start your other screw. With everything in place, screwdriver, and tighten everything down. Just make sure it operates. Good. Safety works. Just like to make sure everything's nice and snug. Just be careful not to break anything. Now we're going to put on the front magazine guide, which is nothing fancy. It's just your front magazine guide. Goes in place. There's your screw. Just screw set in. Magazine guide. Grab your screwdriver. Sorry if my video's a little low. I'm just getting over a little something. My throat's a little tore up. So, get your magazine guide in place, centered. Okay. You can always test it. Take your magazine, slide it over the magazine release, over the magazine guide. Just like so. You want to make sure your magazines are centered. There. See how it operates. Magazine release, magazine guide. Sits down inside the magazine there. Okay. So the magazine guide, the front magazine guide. There's a channel on the magazine. Magazine release in the back. You can see this little notch is cut out on the magazine, and this little catches on the magazine release itself. So, I mean, just like that. Okay, pretty simple. And we're going to install our bolt catch right there. This one had a spring on it. When I cleaned these ones, I did it separate, and I kept the pin and the spring together with them, just so they didn't get lost. So we take the mag catch, get your pin started. Your spring in place. Push her down, grab her punch. That's in place. Everything works as properly designed. You can test that. Grab your bolt. Slide your bolt in. You have to work the trigger so you can get your bolt past the trigger itself. Okay, check your safety. Make sure everything works. Safety's on, safety works, safety's off, fires, just like that. So you can test everything, without firing it before you even stick the rest of the gun apart, so you can know everything is working up until this point. Okay, just like that. Okay, now we're going to remove the bolt just so we can finish assembly here. Alright, first we got to put our front barrel band on. I just showed you previously, it's got these little notches in there. Here's our bottom piece. So you get your barrel band over the barrel, slide in one side, and you have to hold it together, slide it up, and then there you have it. It's in place. Now we just set it in the receiver and or set it in the stock, and we'll bolt it together. I'm not going to put it in the stock at the moment. I am doing some work on it, mainly just reshaping the butt pad that someone attempted to do, but it's not done properly. You can see the white markings I have on there. I have to sand all that off so it sits nice on the stock. But that's how you put that. That's how you assemble and disassemble and assemble the trigger housing on a Stevens model 325. 325A, B, and C. It should relatively be the same when it comes to the trigger housing itself. These are very unique firearms because they were only around for so long, and it's a bolt action 30-30, which you don't see very often at all. So I look forward to getting this one out and testing everything, making sure everything shoots the way it should be shooting, and hopefully it gets used in the deer woods this year just to see how she does. So any questions? I know the angle is kind of rough and I got in the way with some of the springs. Big thing with this is just take pictures before you take it apart and know where your springs go. There's only 3 springs, but they are important how you put them in. And that's really about it. They're pretty simple to take apart once you get over the fact that you got to remove the pins and there's a lot of little pieces in there. Just take your time. You may need little extra help. Here's a pair of pliers, a punch, a pick, so anything to help move your springs where you need them to be so you don't damage anything. But that is the disassembly and assembly of the Stevens Model 325C trigger housing. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to stick it in the stock. I got to finish up work on that, but I did want to finish this up so you all can see. So that's it for now. I'm going to lay this down, and then that's all. You have a good day. Again, this is MP Gunsmith and Firearms. We're in Lewiston, New York. Phone number 716-481-7302. We do anything from full restorations, minor repairs, even deep cleanings like this one. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out. Again, that is NP Gunsmith and Firearms in Lewiston, New York. My name is Nick. Our phone number is 716-481-7302. Thank you.